Hey, I want to talk to you today about things to remember. It was kind of a toss-up here. Today is Pentecost Sunday. I don't know if you know that. Today is Pentecost Sunday. 50 days after Easter, we celebrate Pentecost Sunday. It is also Memorial Day, so we celebrate those who have given their lives for us. So when I tried to work on a message, it was kind of a pull both ways deal, but I feel like this is the one I want to talk to you about. There was a guy who was praying, and he said, "Dear Lord, so far today, I've done right. I haven't lost my temper. I haven't been greedy or grumpy or nasty or selfish or even overindulgent. I'm really glad about that. But in a few minutes, I'm going to get out of bed. And then I'm really going to need a lot more help." That sound like you? Yeah. Somebody said, "Do you wake up grumpy?" And you say, "No, I let her wake up by herself." That's my joke. I'm telling it. You know, in every city and town and community, there are memorials. I'm really sad that we in our country think we have to tear away certain things because it reflects one way or another. They're all memorials. That is, we see these memorials and they remind us of things that we cherish. I've driven a little over 1,000 miles last week, and all along the highway, you see little crosses and flowers. I saw one that was in the shape of a heart with a cross and some flowers in it. And you know that somebody has died, somebody's lost a loved one there, and they signify that there was probably a traffic accident or something had happened. Memorial monuments are set up in nearly every city to commemorate heroes or great citizens of that town or maybe that county or even our state. There are buildings and bridges and highways and colleges and universities and even hospitals or airports that are named after people to help us remember who they were, what they donated to our communities for whatever reason. And every memorial, whether it's a cross on the side of a highway or a memorial in a state park or the name of an institution, it reminds us, it has a message, and that message is important. A memorial is a commemoration to both recollect, rehearse, and even remember. World War II, as we saw in the video, produced many heroes. One such man was named Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare. He was a fighter pilot assigned to an aircraft carrier, the Lexington, in the South Pacific. And one day, his entire squadron was called together and sent on a mission. After his plane was airborne, he happened to look down at his fuel gauge only to realize that someone had forgotten to top off his fuel. And so he knew that he would not have enough fuel to make the trip, do the mission, and return back to the carrier. So reluctantly, he dropped out of formation. His flight leader said, "You can't do it. You've got to turn back." So reluctantly, he drops out. He flies back, headed back towards the fleet. As he was returning to the carrier, he saw something that just turned his blood cold. In fact, he saw a squadron of Japanese aircraft speeding towards that fleet. They were going to bomb it. Somehow, they knew that their bombers were gone, their fighters had left, and that these ships, not knowing they were coming, were left unattended for the most part. The American fighters already gone on the sortie, and the fleet was defenseless. He couldn't reach the squadron in time to have them turn and come back to save their fleet. He couldn't really warn the fleet of the approaching danger, and so there was only one thing left for him to do. He had to somehow divert this group of planes away from the fleet. So he decided to take his plane and dive down right in the middle of all this squadron of fighter pilots, Japanese fighter pilots. He dove his plane into them. 50 caliber guns mounted on the wings. He began to take one out and then another. They were so caught off guard, they didn't realize what he was doing. They didn't realize who he was. And little by little, he wormed his way through, taking one out and then another and then another. Finally, he ran out of bullets. No more ways to fight. So he took his life in his hands. He took his plane, and in an effort to take out as many as he could, he dove towards them, hoping to clip their wings or their tail fin or something to send them downward. As he did that, he took out a few more. Finally, this squadron was so confused by what was taking place, they just turned and flew away. He limped his plane back to that aircraft carrier, landed, and told his story to those who were there. Airplane cameras mounted on his fighter plane somewhere recorded all the events that had taken place. He had actually taken out 5 of those fighter jets by himself without being shot down. What a story. His town, he was given the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was recognized by his town and those that were there. They gave him all kind of awards, the Naval Aviator. He was the first one to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was the first Navy ace of World War II. Well, it just so happened that a year later, Butch was killed in a aerial combat at the age of 29. His hometown said, there's no way that we're going to allow this World War II hero to fade. And so today, if you fly into Chicago, you fly into O'Hare Airport. I've flown in there several times. And I never knew this story till I began to research. It's named in tribute to the courage of this great guy. I never knew that. Isn't that interesting? Today and this weekend, there will be camping trips and picnics and family gatherings, and all of that are wonderful. And I don't mind them because people need to get together and spend time with family. That's a wonderful thing. But if we don't stop and remember and reflect, we just make it another day off from work. We really don't understand that these men gave their lives, that some of them gave the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. We are here today because we celebrate that freedom. In the Bible, Brother Branson spoke this morning on the rock that is higher than I. In the Bible, stones were often used to record references, become markers of what God had done for the different people. I mean, we've got Jesus rolling away a stone so that people could see that he had been resurrected. We saw that Jesus told us that if we didn't praise the Lord, the rocks would cry out. Man, we have a worship team that leads us in that direction. Samuel used stones as a memorial for God's goodness. And when you think about it, when's the last time you stopped and just really stopped and took time to remember all of the things that God has done for you? I mean, when I stop and think about it, He's done so much for me. If I stop my busy schedule enough to think about it, He's done more than I could ever dream or hope for. And then remember and act like God's in control. And our text this morning is found in the 4th chapter of the book of Joshua. Joshua used stones from the Jordan River to build a memorial as a public testimony acknowledging what God had done and what God was doing for Israel and for us today, I suppose. And if you turn there, and I'm not going to read it all, but the first 5 verses kind of tell the story, and then the rest of the chapter fills it in. You see, if you have to take this text in the right context, Israel had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. We've heard that story. And they did all of it their own way without God because of their lack of faith and trust in Him. It's usually where we wind up when we do that. When we have a lack of faith and confidence in God and what He's doing in our lives, we have a tendency to get off track, lose the path. I'm afraid that's what's happening a lot in America today. America has lost its sight. They don't think about all the memorials that remind us that this is more than a holiday for hot dogs and a good time, that somebody paid the ultimate price so that we could have the freedom that we have today. And I believe sometimes our government even has lost their way. They've just forgotten what it takes. Joshua was anointed by God to lead God's people to a better and more fulfilled life. Joshua chapter 3, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. The Lord will do amazing things among you. Can I tell you that today? Consecrate yourselves, because tomorrow God will do amazing things for you. He says, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. There comes a time to listen. There comes a time to move. God was telling those people that it was time to do both and not to let time pass between so that He can accomplish what He wants to accomplish in our lives. We drag our feet or we get too far ahead. You know what? It's nice to get on God's timetable and on God's clock and say to Him, whatever you want in my life, that's what I want. You know, if you're graduating high school or looking for a new job or a mate, or you're in a position now and you're thinking you need something better or whatever, man, you need to stop and make sure you're on God's timetable. Be thankful. Reflect. Remember what all God has done. Do you notice something that's very important here? Joshua was asking to get 12 men, one from each tribe of the tribes of Israel. It was because I believe he wanted to make sure that all of them were invested in this move. All of them were involved in this move. Can I tell you something? Not one leader from any tribe would be excluded or even would be able to get a free pass from being part of this move. That's what I want at Maranatha Family Church. We need to all be a part of this move. We're not just singled out here, one person doing one job. We're a family of God, and we're seeking one thing, which is to move where God wants us to move, do what God wants us to do, and get involved and be a part of what He's doing. All 12 tribes have been in the wilderness together, and God wanted all 12 tribes to come together to Canaan at the same time. We're all headed to the same place. I'm not against the Church of God. I'm not against the First Baptist. I'm not against Thank you. Compassion. We're all in this thing together. We're working towards the same end, which is doing what God wants us to do and winning the world. And so that's important to me. When I read that, I thought he was making sure that every tribe was vested in this thing. Not just me and my tribe, but it's all of us that are working together. There were 2 sets of stone memorials that day. That was, I don't believe, by accident. This was to be a remembrance at both levels. One was set up in the middle of the Jordan to remember where the priest stood, where the Ark of the Covenant stood, where God rolled back the waters that at its own admission overflowed its banks all the time of harvest. I often say that when I mention that story. Do you think God was surprised when they showed up? When they showed up at that river that day at Jordan, and it overflowed all its banks all the time of harvest? Do you think God went, oh no, I forgot that was going to be there? No, God knew it was going to be there. He knew the miracle that had taken place. You see, the last time they did that was at the Red Sea, and those people have died out. They don't have that new relationship, that vivid memory of God doing that. And so now God brings them to this Jordan, and he rolls back the waters. When the feet of the priest step in, it rolls it back, and they cross over into the promised land. They needed to know the strength of God's power. I'm so thankful that we had the service we did down at St. Simon's last week. Wow, was it a powerful service. And that older generation just absolutely fell in love with it. And they said, Pastor, this is what we've hoped and wanted for. But it wasn't an old, draggy, old-fashioned. I mean, it was powerful at God's presence. God wanted them to know we set up this stone so that you could remember the power of God and his deliverance that comes to you. But then they went on to the other side, and they set up stones there. Another pillar was set up at Gilgal, showing not only where they had been, but where they were going. Because God's not so much concerned with where we've been as much as where we're going. It's imperative that we understand God is a God of vision. God is a God of tomorrow. God is a God, sure he is of yesterday, but yesterday's gone. And he's a God of taking us into the new dimensions that he wants us to be in. God is interested in your future. This memorial was set up so they could remember that God had been with them for 40 years in the desert. And that through impossible times, he had walked them across that desert. And the banks of the river at flood stage were an impossible task. But when they crossed, the Lord had allowed them to cross safely and on dry land. And so it was to be an encouragement to them. It was to be a marker for them to remember, hey, that's what God did for us. All of us have markers that we can remember. I have a thing on on my boat. It's a fish finder, chart finder kind of thing they call it. And when you're going along and you run over some brush, or you run over a certain place, or you get to a certain place that you like, you can punch a button and it sets a marker there. So that if you want to return to that place, you can go back to it because there's a marker there. All of us have markers. We have markers. Sometimes they're at an altar where we know we met the Lord. Sometimes there's a Sunday school a place. There's a little trailer park down here about a mile or so where I became a Christian. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Never changes. And every time I go past there, I don't care what time of the day or what I'm doing, when I ride by it, I always recall it. It's my marker. It reminds me of what God did for me. There's a lot of things that would be considered a memorial by today's standards. Not all of them necessarily have spiritual value, but they're memorials. That is, there are statues, and there are plaques, and there are trophies, and there are ribbons, and there are pictures, and there are keepsakes and graves. Why, some even have a tattoo. I was talking to a young lady the other day, and she had a tattoo, and she had one on her shoulder, and I just happened to notice it was in the form of a motorcycle, and I said, well, that's a neat tattoo. She said, actually, it's my grandfather's initials, and it was in the shape of a motorcycle. I thought it was the coolest thing, but it reminded her of her granddad. It reminded her of him and what all he meant to her. You see, somehow we have to do that this morning. We have to set markers. We have to remember what's been done for us. God doesn't want us to forget what he's accomplished in our lives. We should never take our eyes off the future, but we've got to remember where he's brought us from to appreciate it. So how do we do that this morning? Well, if we're going to make a memorial meaningful and beneficial to our lives, then we're going to have to, number one, make sure that it doesn't exalt us. No memorial is worth much if we build it to ourselves. So many people say, well, that's my pew. You ever seen that person come in church, walk down the aisle, stop right by your pew and go, you know what they're doing? They're saying, that's my seat and you got it. I'll take that seat out and set it on fire. We don't have no personal seats here. They belong to us and the Lord. I didn't cost you nothing. I didn't charge you anything for that. No memorial ought to exalt you. So how do we do it? 4 ways. 4 simple, quick ways. 1, by not forgetting. 2, by being intentional. 3, by making a difference. And 4, by sharing the experience. So let's look at them real quick. First one is not forgetting. I put that on my notes. So how's your memory? I have to tell you, mine's not as good as it used to be. I struggle. I called Jeremy, I called you Stone in the first service. I forget. I have to ask Teresa all the time, what's her name? Well, those seniors at the retreat last week, I was like, hey, how you doing, brother? That's what you do when you don't know it. How you doing, mama? We declared next year we having name tags. We're getting lanyards with names on them. So how's your memory? I heard of this older couple that was having trouble with their memory, like a lot of us. And so they decided to take a memory course together. I thought it was great. A few months later, the husband's out in the garden, and he's working his garden, and this neighbor stopped by and began to talk to him about his memory course. And he says to him, well, what was the name of the instructor? And the husband paused for a second. Then he asked, hey, what's the name of that real pretty flower that smells so nice but it has thorns? And the guy said, you mean Rose? He said, yeah. Hey, Rose, what was the name of the instructor? Oh, that's bad, isn't it? Deuteronomy reminds us, beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt and from the house of bondage. That word beware there takes on a lot of meaning because it's trying to tell us there's things that can happen that's bad when you forget. I think that that's what's wrong with America today. We have a great country. We have a great country, but we've been going somewhat downhill in a spiral for some time now. And it's because we've forgotten who made us a great country. It was not only those who served and fought and gave their lives, but it was a God who had his hand on America and has helped us to where we are. And we have turned around and acted as if we did it on our own self, that we built memorials that were to us. We've done it. No, God's done it. And he's still doing it. Of all the things that God did for Israel, you'd think that they wouldn't forget. But the truth is, they did. In fact, they soon after God did something for them, they would just forget. They forgot about God. They reverted back to their old ways of thinking and their old ways of life. And that's what happens when you forget that where you are is because of what God has done in your life. I'm amazed that God would allow me to accomplish and have what I have today, and it's only him. I'm amazed that God has done more than I could ever dream of. He teaches us, ask, I'll give you immeasurably more than you could even pray or ask for. But just don't forget who did it. You know, that's a bad thing. You know, you do something and you do it for the right reasons, but then somebody just forgets you did it. Kind of hurts, doesn't it? You wonder if God doesn't go, I've done all this for them, and look, they don't even remember. It's me. They don't even remember what I've done for them. Israel, just plain out, God does all these miracles, feeds them 40 years, clothes them, walks them through the desert. And somehow or another, they get over the Jordan. They start a new life. Joshua dies, and the scripture tells us in Judges, and they forgot. They forgot God. Started out on their own trail, and it's been a miserable journey. We need memorials because we have short memories on certain things. Our wives call them selective memories. We forget certain things. But you know, I can remember golf courses. I love to play golf, so I remember courses. I played a golf course this week in the North Georgia mountains that I played about, when we were in Dalton, 35 years ago, 40 years ago maybe. And I played that course. And while I didn't remember every hole, I remembered a lot of them. When I would get on it, I'd immediately bring back a memory. Probably not a good one, but a memory. And I enjoyed it. And I told the guys I were with, the other pastors, and I said, man, I remember this course. It's a great course. We have memories. I have memories of, I can remember the one and only hole-in-one I've ever had. I'd like to think I'd had more, but I didn't. But I can tell you that it was in Ponte Vedra, Florida. It was at the TPC of Sawgrass Stadium course, hole number 8. I hit a 5-iron into a 176-yard par 3 in the hole. Somebody said, "Did you see it go in?" I said, "Are you crazy? I can't see that far." Little caddy I had said, "It's in the hole." I said, "Shut up, boy. Don't you say that unless you know it's true." He said, "No, sir, it's in the hole." I can remember that. Most of us have a short memory. Most of the time, I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. In fact, while I was still trying to diet a little bit, I wrote in my phone everything I ate, because you have a tendency to lie to yourself. You understand that? We lie. We don't think we do, but we lie. What'd you have to eat today? I didn't have much of anything. You write it down, you're like, good Lord, I ate that. You remember the things that are important to you, and in your mind you categorize them by importance. The hole-in-one moment, I'll never forget. It's always there, it'll be there. I'll never forget the day I truly accepted the Lord as my personal Savior. Never forget that day. I may not can tell you the exact day I know about, But I can tell you the story over and over, and I do, over and over and over again. I remember the day I married Teresa. This June 5 will be 52 years. I know why y'all clapping, because she put up with me for 52 years. I can remember each of my children, the days that they were born, where they were born, remember. I remember my grandkids. I may not always remember their names, but I remember them. And they get put into special files that cannot be erased like a computer or misplaced. Remembering is a powerful, powerful thing. Secondly, by being intentional. There will come a day that this day will be passed by as if it doesn't exist, both in the power of Pentecost and in the power of the memorial. People will go about their business. They'll forget it because they have not made it important in their lives. You can put a string on your finger, and it may be cute, but it'll not guarantee that you'll remember something, I promise you. It's Brother Bruce comes up every other week or so and gives us a soaking verse, and we read it. But he encourages us to place that in your mind, rehearse it over and over. Be intentional, listen to me, be intentional about both hearing, memorizing, and placing it in your spirit. That's important. So you have to be intentional about that. Last year or so, I was asked to speak at our BGMC banquet where all the churches were there being honored. And they, by virtue of, I guess we were number one last year and this year, they asked me to step up there. And I'm better at preaching and speaking to you guys than I am doing something like that. I didn't know I was going to have to do it, so I hadn't really written anything down. But I got up and I said, they want to know, how can a little church in South Georgia do what you guys do? And the only word I could think of was the word intentional. I said to those folks, you have to be intentional about it. You can't do it haphazardly. You'll never, listen, if you give to missions haphazardly or tithe, you'll never do it. You have to be intentional about it. It has to be something, that's why I think God told, through Paul said, upon the first day of the week, he told us to lay aside that tithe. Why? Because it's got to be intentional. It's before I pay my bills. It's before I didn't plan on getting on a tithing message, so don't nobody get all mad about anything. If you're not paying tithes and you're under conviction, that's not my problem. Get to an altar and get it right. So I believe that's why he told Paul that. It's got to be intentional. You can't say, well, if I get to the end of the month, I got any money left, I'll do it. No. He said upon the first day of the week. If you decide I'll give to missions when I can afford it, you'll never afford it. You'll never afford it. I didn't mean, this is not even in my notes. This is free material. So, you have to be intentional. And I told him that day, you have to be intentional. Missions is something that you have to say, this is what our vision is. And that's what we are here at Maranatha family. We're a visional church. You know, I can remember the day I truly found Christ and the day I settled who was first in my life. Because you have to be intentional. It's one thing to come down and pray a sinner's prayer. It's one thing to say to the Lord, I'm going to serve you. But you have to be intentional about putting him first in your life. You see, that's what he tells us. Seek first the kingdom of God. He tells us to put him first. He tells us, even in the Old Testament, he said, have no other gods before me. So he's saying, you got to be intentional. Can I tell you that today, church? that you have to be intentional. I'm going to serve God, but not only am I going to serve God, but I'm going to put God first in my life. And so I remember that. The day that everything else had to be measured against what I did with Christ and not Christ fitting in to everything else. The definition for intentional is done in a way that is planned or intended. Another word would be deliberate. To be deliberate about something. Somebody asked me one time, said, how come people get saved and go away and they don't do it? They don't stick with it and they come back. And I said, well, at least they come back. That's a good thing. But it's because they have to become both deliberate and intentional about serving God. Intentional does not happen by accident. Intentional means that you have an awareness of an end to be achieved. I've got to know what I want and be intentional or deliberate in what I'm going to. A dream is not a plan unless it has a plan. So a dream is just a dream unless you become intentional and deliberate about how you're going to achieve that dream. Whatever you do, I didn't even intend on this going this way. Intentional is a readiness and a willingness to achieve an end result. Someone put it this way, said, you'll never have to worry about hitting a bullseye if you don't aim. The arrow just goes anywhere. So many people live life like that. They don't have any plan. They don't have any intentional direction that they want to go. In the life of Maranatha Family Church, we're seeing God do some amazing things. And we're trusting Him to do many more amazing things in the days to come. We don't believe we've arrived. We don't believe that we've made it. We believe these are only steps that we're making to go further down the road. Whether it's doing hometown ministry or foreign ministries or ministries within inside of our church, all of them are intentional to bring us to a place of working together. He didn't say, hey, everybody that wants to grab a stone, grab one. How many people want to grab a stone? I'm not talking about a rock. I'm talking about a stone. You're like, yeah, I believe I'll pass. No, he was intentional. How we're going to build this altar? We're going to get 12 men from every tribe to bring a stone. That was intentional. That was by definition simply making a difference. So there has to be a purpose. The stones were there for us. We want to be intentional about how we reach this community for Christ so that everything we do keeps us on course and on focus with that intentional action. All right, enough about that. Thirdly, by making a difference. Any monument set up to glorify men will rust and break, whether it's trophies or plaques or ribbons. All of those help us to remember our accomplishments, but we have to understand that without God's help, we couldn't do it. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It's to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. I thought that's pretty good. Someone else said, do more than belong, participate. Y'all didn't say amen at all. I'm going to read that one more time. Do more than belong, participate. Thank you. Do more than care, help. Do more than believe, practice. Do more than be fair, be kind. Do more than forgive, forget. And do more than dream, work. I was driving down some curvy, I've been up on top of a mountain, and I was coming across that mountain, and I was driving. And the roads were narrow, and they were winding, and they were scary. And I came to this stop sign where I needed to make a left. And right as I made this left, I saw a young mother standing over, and I caught just a glimpse of her sign that said, "Single mother, need help." Normally, I don't always do for people. I was going so quickly, and the sign was just so quick, I barely had time to read it. Not a real good place to turn around. I thought, I'll just keep going. And from there, all the way till I reached my destination, I thought about that young mother. For some reason, I felt like I should have stopped and given her some money. And it bothered me, and it bothers me today. And there's not a lot I can do about it, but I trust that God will keep my heart tender to not only be compassionate, but be kind. I don't know who she was and don't know what she needed, nothing about her. And I normally don't do that. For the next couple of hours, it broke my heart. Fourthly, we can remember things by sharing your story. The monument of stones was put there to be a remembrance, especially to the parents. They were to remember to share their story of God's goodness to their kids. So in those days, they didn't have TV, and they didn't have movies, and they didn't have phones and iPads and games. They sat around at night after they had eaten, and they listened to the old people. And the older ones would tell stories about things that mostly that God had done for them. And it left indelible impressions upon those young people. My son said that he wished that he'd taken a video camera and videoed my dad before he lost his mind, and listened to him tell the stories. Stories that later he couldn't recall because of Alzheimer's. Stories that he told of being a young 16-year-old boy from middle Georgia going all the way out to California to work on what they call the CC camp. Send money home to his mom and dad. And he told stories that happened. And I remember the first day I walked in and I said to him, "Hey, do you remember when you went out to California?" And he said, "No, I don't remember that. But I remember it. Stories he had told me." It's imperative for us to share our stories. You see, Christianity, in my opinion only, is only one generation from becoming extinct. You said, "But Pastor, I know what the book says." I know what the book says. But I also know that generations can forget God. God doesn't forget us, but generations can. We're raising a generation, church. We're raising a generation that's forgetting God. He's not the most important thing in life, and I'll tell you the reason why. He sees that it's not, they see it's not the most important thing in our life. When they see it's the most important thing in your life, it'll become the most important thing in their life. You share the story. And we're raising a generation that's suffering because they're forgetting the things of God. I think it's because each generation has to, it is incumbent upon us to pass to the next generation the good news of Christ. We are to remember and then share. I'm not sure how good I am anymore around here. I can't do as much as I used to do. But I've tried to influence each of these staff members in positive ways. I wish I could do more. That was my message to the old people down to the seniors. I shouldn't say old people, I am one. It was my message to the seniors down there. Is the powerful influence that we have to leave to others. We don't have to be preachers. We just need to be a good storyteller. Jesus shared his parables, his stories, in the forms of parables. And we're to share our faith in the same way. You don't have to be some powerful preacher to tell somebody of the goodness of God. You don't have to be some high-powered evangelist, TV preacher to tell somebody of the goodness of God. We sing that song, He's Running After Me. God took them from wandering 40 years in the promised land, took them across the flooding Jordan on dry land, and just when he did, and had he done when they crossed the Red Sea, and remember to tell somebody about it, he said. We have a chance to make a difference by telling what God has done in our lives. I don't know about you, but he's been good to me. Better to me than anything I could ever dream for. We don't all have Red Sea experiences, but it's okay to tell what God has done for you. Some of you have amazing testimonies that need to be shared. What do you mean by amazing? You got to be like you and be a dopehead and rebellious? No. Some of them have a great story like that one right there who says, I've been saved since I was 6 years old. What a testimony of the goodness of God to keep you. So that's what God says to us today. Remember. This morning, we want to remember a couple of things. We want to remember this is the day of Pentecost, where God sent the blessed Holy Spirit down and revolutionized our lives to be able to spread the gospel. We want to remember today that it's Memorial Day, and that all of those who have served and given their lives to give us freedom, we don't want to just pass it off. Our loved ones that have fought the good fight and are now passed on, we want to remember them. We want to remember a Sister Grovenstein that prayed this church into existence. We want to remember a Sister Riner, Sister Barnhill, Brother Barnhill, Sister Grovenstein, who helped to begin the beginnings of this church. We want to remember a Pastor Naums who for 27 years dug this place out of nothing, went some weeks without an offering. We want to remember a Michael Beck who taught this church how to pray. We want to remember all the good things that God's done for us. Not only the soldiers that have passed on, but the Christian soldiers who have passed on as well. We want to remember and live for the one who, most of all, died for us. One that has never left us or forsaken us. One that even through the tough times, when we felt like we were all alone, He was there. So I just wanted to leave you today with some things to remember. Donnie. Father, thank you today for the things that you've left us to remember. When I close my eyes, Lord, I can see my mama pray. I can see her hands raised at a kitchen sink, speaking in a heavenly language. I can remember the faithfulness of my dad, who worked every day, who didn't have a lot but gave us everything we needed. I can remember, Lord, the goodness of God, who saved a wretch like me. I can remember a God who took the time to come to a house and find a lost soul and bring him home. I was the lamb that you placed on your shoulders and walked me back to the flock. I remember, Lord, not only what you have done, but I remember distinctly believing that you told us you'd go with us and that we're going to take the future. We're going to remind people of the faithfulness of God. We're going to believe you to do what no other can do. Lord, we believe you. While your heads are bowed and eyes are closed, maybe there's somebody in here today and you need to make it right with God. Maybe you've done it before, but you need to do it again. Maybe you're here today and you need something specific from God. God's able to meet that need. You've asked Him and seemingly He hasn't done it, and so you've kind of struggled with that. But let me remind you, God will never come too little with too late. He'll take care of you. God will take care of you. We're reminded, casting all of our care upon Him because He cares for us. So if you're here today and you want to walk to this altar, I'll open them up right now for you. And I want to pray with you today that God will do whatever you need to do and He needs to do in your life. Don't be ashamed. Come on. If you're here today, come on. If you're here today and you need prayer just for a specific item in your life, healing or financial or physical or whatever, just stand to your feet wherever you're at. Just stand up. Thank you. Are there others? Thank you. Thank you. God's a good God, isn't He? Woo! God's a good God. You hear me? God's a good God. God's a good God. He does what we cannot do for ourselves. I'm going to ask a few ladies if they'll come and gather by Amy right now. Pray for her. And then the rest of you that see these standing, would you just go to them? Just go and lay your hand on them right now. Would you just, wherever they're standing, there's some on my left, some in the middle, some on the right. Just go and make sure nobody's standing by themselves. Place your hand on them and begin to pray for them right now. Father, in the name of Jesus, we remember that you're a good God. We remember that you've been here in times past and you'll be here in times future. And there's not one thing that's going to happen to us that you're not aware of. And you've already prepared a way. We might not know that way at the moment. We might not understand, but you are the way. And you're going to take care of us today. Lord, I pray for every one of these that are standing today, that you lay your hands on them right now, and that you bring physical and spiritual healing into their lives. That you touch them by the power of God, and that you lay your hand on them right now. Let the Spirit of God begin to move in their hearts and lives. Touch them by your grace and your glory. Lord, we love you so much. Thank you for your touch. Thank you for your touch.